Welcome to Feeling Seen, the podcast about the movies that make us feel seen. My co-host today is an award-winning educator, professional, national speaker, journalist, thought leader, and media critic, Dr. John Paul Higgins. Dr. John Paul is no stranger to the mic. They are the creator, executive producer, and host of the Black Fat Femme podcast, being named one of the top Black podcasts to listen to by both Ebony and Pride magazine. Their brand new book, Black Fat Femme, Revealing the Power of Visibly Queer Voices in Media and Learning to Love Yourself, is available right now in bookstores and online. And in addition to that new book, we are also talking about the 1993 coming-of-age film, This Boy's Life. It stars a young Leonardo DiCaprio as Tobias Wolff, also known as Jack, alongside cinematic greats Ellen Barkin and Robert De Niro. Jonah Blackman plays Jack's friend Arthur Gale. Dr. John Paul, or Dr. John Paul Higgins?
Dr. John Paul's fine.
Okay, what else do the people need to know about you before we get started?
You know, so I will say this, folks need to know that I am a critic. So I, have done some stuff with Rotten Tomatoes and, I'm a part of the African American Critics Association here in LA. It's just, I find being someone who is not necessarily just watching stuff for entertainment value, but really looking at how it shapes representation and how it shapes the ways that we see ourselves, not only just in real life, but also, in media is something I'm really extremely passionate about. So this is really exciting for me because I love talking television and film, and I feel like we're going to have a really good time together.
Well, that is, and it's something that it's one of the, just such a luxury of the show. It like getting to talk about these things with people and getting character picks from them. It means if they're movies I've seen before, I get to watch them through a new lens of trying to consider it through like the research I do on a person and trying to apply that to what I'm watching and making connections and such. And then, discovering things too brought to me that I have never seen before. I had never seen this Boy's Life, your selection for this. Yeah. And so but I wanted to start with first, let's start with the book. Let's talk about the book and what is coming in that. And like same name as pulling a name from the podcast. Are these sort of listeners of that, is it like an extension of you in this consolidated form? What are people expecting? Yeah,
so being, like I said, if you listen to the Black Fat Femme podcast, you will very quickly learn that, our whole tagline is celebrating the intersection of identity and really this notion of finding joy and being kind of the other. And that's kind of, I always tell people to know anything about Dr. John Paul is to know kind of like my journey in media and in terms of representation came from years ago where someone had told me that they didn't date Black, fat, or femme guys, right?
Well, I understand you're a child of you were an adolescent in the 2000s.
I was, yeah.
So that sounds very time appropriate there.
Yeah. And so, and that's what I talk about in the book, gay.com and MySpace and being on social media and being kind of told that you don't look or perform a certain type of way, right?
No fats, no femmes, no Asians.
No, that's it. Yeah. And so growing up, hearing that and seeing that and being told that in so many different fashions. And then also growing up, what I like to tell people, in a cult, right? I grew up in a cult. And so I talk very openly about growing up in a cult and this idea of I can't talk about who I am or coming to terms with who I am. So where am I looking? And then learning that the only place I can look is television. And so now I'm trying to find myself in television shows, and I'm trying to find myself within people, and I'm trying to find myself within reality shows. And so I opened the book talking about that, this notion of feeling lost. And then finally, I also talk about the Luther Vandross of it all, and not specifically about his sexuality, but this idea of what the world was, the questions Luther Vandross was being asked were the same questions people were asking me as a kid, right? Why do you act this way? Why do you talk this way? Why do you sing this way? And so then growing up and seeing, Andre Leon Talley, and then seeing Miss Lawrence and seeing Derek J and all of these Black, queer, fat figures. Yeah. Loving who they are and eventually getting to a place and being like, oh, I can actually be these people. I can actually have the life that they have. That's really what this book is. And then really telling people, okay, now that I've actualized this is what my life looks like now. So it's just really much my biggest piece. I always tell people the reason why I wrote this book and the reason why I stand in it is that we oftentimes wait till folks get to where Andre Leon Talley and Luther Vandross are. Like after they've passed, we celebrate them. Yeah. I want folks like Latrice Royale, who wrote my forward and people like Miss Lawrence, who I have a really good relationship with because of the book. I want them to know that I'm celebrating them and telling them that they are the reason. Like, I want to give them their flowers now. And that's really what this book is. I'm giving people their flowers while they have time to actually smell them.
And with growing up, I believe you were a Jehovah's Witness.
I was.
Did that limit the media that you could intake? So was that something you were watching surreptitiously, or was there allowance for?
And so I talk about this too. My mom, I mean, I grew up in a home of a single parent mother, and so my mom was at work all the time.
Right.
And so a lot of it was me sneak watching or me finding pockets and times where I could look for this representation without them coming in and being like, "What are you watching?" But and it's not to say I didn't get caught. Undressed was one of my favorite television shows.
Oh my God, absolutely. The Gen Z will never know softcore.
They'll never know soft porn. And MTV after 10 p.m., it was soft porn. And
MTV after 10 and HBO after 11.
Amen. Cinemax became Skinemax. Let's talk about that, right?
Yeah, real sex, taxi
real
cab
sex,
confessions.
all of it, honey. The taxi cab confessions of it all. I saw my first nipple on taxi cab confessions, right?
I'm quite sure I saw a lot of firsts on taxi cab and real sex.
Yes, God. And so saying all of that, right? Like, I think, watching those shows and recognizing like, oh, that's what sexuality is.
Yeah.
Coming to terms with like, even though I had a very media driven knowledge of what sex was and what sex could be, very much finding myself in these storylines, even if they were, and I talk a lot about this, like I dig at Will and Grace a lot, even though I did enjoy the show while it was on, but I talk about
at the time it was a leap forward.
Yes. Yeah. And so I talk a lot about Will and Grace. I talk a lot about Ellen. I talk a lot about a lot of these shows that had a lot of queer characters or queer storylines and what that meant for me as a person who wasn't able to talk about them and how I made sense of it all.
And now the movie in question today is This Boy's Life, starring, speaking centrally, the Leonardo DiCaprio role, where he plays the daughter of Ellen Barkin, who is she's a good parent. She's a responsible parent, but she's a single woman parent, single mom parent in the 1950s. She's doing her best. She has a tendency of sort of picking up and running out when things get difficult. She has terrible taste in men and has a string of abusive boyfriends in her past. And so the son kind of has to follow along, but she's responsible for him and she is good to him, but ends up in a situation in Seattle, thinks she meets a nice man, a mechanic, and played by Robert De Niro. And it turns out he's an abusive bastard. And we are listening to the narration of and watching the experience of this boy's life from the titular boy, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
My mom had her own way of solving problems. She left them behind. That's what she did with the Nash, just left it there.
Things are gonna start looking up. Can you feel it?
Yep.
I can feel it. God, the good times are coming.
My mom had high hopes, especially for me. I've been giving her no end of grief since she left Dad. But I decided I was gonna do better. I was gonna have straight arrow friends, I was gonna get all A's in school, and I was gonna keep my nose clean. I promised it, and I meant it.
So when did this movie first enter your purview?
Yeah, so I was probably maybe like 9 or 10, and it was around the time, my mom, I say this, my mom had 2 jobs at that time. So that means we had cable. And when mom didn't have more than one job, we didn't usually have, if we did have cable, it was usually basic cable. But there was a time in my life where I knew things were good. And it was partly because we had a VCR and we had cable. And so it was one of those things where my mom, and I always tell people, knowing me is knowing when my mom would go to work. My mom used to work from like 9 to 3 in the afternoon, and then she would go back to work from 11 to 7. Oh, wow. And she kind of did that for years, where she would like work at Pick and Save at night, and then she would work at a convalescent home during the day. And so when it was like in between that time when mom was asleep, it was always kind of like, ooh, I can catch this movie on. Or if it was the weekend and my mom was gone to work, I would watch it. And I watched it often because it wasn't specifically Leonardo that I was infatuated with. I was infatuated with the fact that he had a best friend who wasn't outwardly queer, but he specifically had a friend who exemplified the femininity that I exemplified. And so it was kind of like
Arthur Gale. Arthur Gale is the character.
Yeah. And so having that character kind of be in my own head, right, as a kid, 9 or 10, not really knowing it as queer, but knowing like this person looks and acts like me. It was almost like I had a friend in that character. And every time I watched it, that character knew exactly what I was going through. That was the thing that held me in that moment, was just like, oh, I have this character who's in my own head a friend, you know? So.
Well, and we meet that character in a pretty spectacular fashion. This is the memoir of the writer Tobias Wolff, who's a literature professor of, some import, and he teaches at Stanford now and everything. But this is his upbringing, and this is a real boy, Arthur Gale, and they're in the town of Concrete, Washington, which I did look up to see if it still existed. And Concrete is considerably north of Seattle, pretty close to the Canadian border. So this is rural Washington.
Yeah.
And Jack is something of a square peg as well. He doesn't have a dad. He doesn't really have a sense of place. His mom has moved him so many times. And when he first meets Arthur Gale, the shithead boys that Jack hangs out with are like, yeah, you should call him a homo.
Right.
Because he has a delicate way of walking. There are assumptions, there are inferences about this boy, Arthur Gale. And so he pushes Jack's character. He's Arthur's like insulting Jack because Jack's being a jerk, and he's going to give it to him. He's not going to be passive.
You know what he did? He mouthed off to me the other day. I was gonna fucking sock him one. He called me a bourgeois.
Rig's a bourgeois.
I don't know.
Hey, call him a homo.
Why?
Yeah, just see what he says.
Yeah. My, what do we have here? Elmer Fudd and his hunting boys. Look at all that yellow. Boy, didn't your mama teach you to wash your hands after you pee? Shut up. Strike one. Ooh, that was very good. Very original. Did you just make that up? That was very, very clever. Why don't you just fuck off, dick lick? Excuse me. Woo!
And Jack finally calls him a homo.
Right.
And then Arthur proceeds to kick his ass.
Right.
And just lays Jack out. And that was, I'm thinking of when this movie came out, like this was the 1990s, this is the teenage Leonardo DiCaprio. It is crazy now to look at that and be like, it's a goddamn good queer, like presumptively queer character that we have here. And I was really like taken aback at like the fact that kid is never a punching bag. Like that kid was raised in this town to have to protect himself, and he takes that mantle on very proactively.
Yeah. And to your point, I think it's one of those things where you recognize too, like, it's funny because me and my colleague were joking about that the other day on a Zoom call. We were saying, God bless whoever catches the rage that I carry as a, a Black queer person. Not to say that I'm a walking or a ticking time bomb, but what I'm saying is that character is a great exemplification of that, right? Like, you can only beat up on somebody so many times before they turn around and say, I have to protect myself. And I think that's the thing I really liked about Arthur, was that even though the world saw him as a sissy, he was very much, and I say sissies with quotations, very much Arthur was in this mind of, I got me because I'm the only person that got me, right? Like there's no other way for me to kind of move around this world. And even the subtle, there are subtle moments where you can see the softness of Arthur. You can still see that life has hardened him just as much as, and it's interesting because it's like, even though the film focuses so much on Jack's character, you can still see so much of Jack and Arthur and vice versa. And it was just a very interesting parallel to watch happen in the film.
Well, and it was something too where I really appreciated that in this guy's life, and he felt it worthy of like putting, like, this was clearly such a consequential person in his life that like Arthur is a meaningful co-starring role in this movie, and he's sort of the only other person who gets him in this town. And there's a moment where like after the beatdown scene, like sometime later, like they're both in Boy Scouts, it turns out, and Jack asks him why his dad never comes, and he just like in wonderfully queer fashion, he's like, I don't have a dad, I never had a dad, I sprang fully from my mother's imagination. And it was like, that is the best gay son thing I've ever heard.
Right.
You like my dog? Yeah, it's nice. He's smart, too. He can talk. Sure. sure. I just about believe you.
Pepper, what's on a tree? Bark. Pepper, I want to ask you something. How's the world treating you? Rough? I know how you mean.
It's dumb. A little funny, though. So how come your dad never comes to meetings with you?
I don't have a dad. I never did. I sprang full-blown from my mother's imagination. You want to walk on with me and Pepper?
And then they go on a walk and they're teenagers smoking cigarettes together, but they're eating ice cream. And Arthur tells him, like, you're an alien like me. Like, he sees, like, even though they started off on bad terms, he sees more than Jack can see in himself why Jack is angry, it seems like.
Yeah.
And there is just, like, watching that feeling like such an authentic testament to the way a pushed down class can see in you something that you cannot see in yourself, because you're not technically part of a marginalized demographic, but like how pain will unite people in that way and then find community within that pain to create something that is beautiful and supportive.
Yeah. And I've even said this, in my own work. I think the reason why this movie, even though this movie doesn't have the, the Black storyline, right? It's still very much an intersectional. So there's two pieces to this film that actually really, as I think about it and as I've kind of focused on it, really thinking about, like you said, the class piece of it all, but also this idea of what toxic masculinity looks like. I even for myself, like I said, in a lot of my work, I talk about this, but this notion of there is more that unites cisgender men than what they want to give credit, and how no one ever really talks about it. And I think that's what a lot of it was as much as Jack was being, beaten and being, basically terrorized by this stepfather of his, right? There was this softness that Jack yearned. And I think he found that in Arthur. And I think that's what Arthur saw, even though Jack was trying to put on the front to make fun of him. And so that's the thing I constantly tell a lot of people, is that a lot of the homophobia and a lot of the, heteronormativity and all these other pieces that we see, a lot of it is this yearning for male connection, in a way. And I even say that now, like for me as an adult, I'm getting ready to be 40 in a couple of months. And I still sit with this notion of, I don't have like a cisgender male best friend per se.
Right. Yeah.
And how much I still, like, a lot of my core people in my life are women or trans women, and how I still have this yearning as a cisgender person to have that element in my life. And so it's just a very interesting thing that I've always kind of picked out of this film, is that you're watching two people who recognize that they are so different actually realize that they truly are the same, even though the world is trying to paint them as two different people. And how sexuality is oftentimes like, it's not even it's a non-factor in a lot of things, right? Like, we make it so much about sexuality, but really it's not. It's two people who are looking to be protected and loved and cared for. And I think that's, for me, is something that I've always found so beautiful about this film.
Well, there's a moment between, my favorite moment in the film is the scenes between them are just so wonderful. And the scenes with Leonardo DiCaprio and Ellen Barkin are so beautiful. But there's he's become like quite close with Arthur, and they spend a lot of time together, and they're playing around they're playing the piano and singing in Arthur's house. And you're like, and they start, like, it's a close up on their faces, and you see how Arthur's watching Jack, and I got overcome with nerves. Like, I was yelling at the screen. I was like, don't do it. Please don't do it.
Please don't. Yeah.
Still Maggie, as you and I were young. Dun, 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 dun. Blue Monday, how I hate.
I was so afraid of how Jack had been conditioned by his place in the world and by his abusive stepdad. Right. And then Arthur does kiss him on the cheek, and there's a pause and there's a freeze, and I was like, he's gonna hit him.
Yeah.
And then he just doesn't. And there's like a pause, and both of them are kind of unsure. And then Jack smiles and they start playing and singing again. And the relief that washed over me, watching this boy who seems to act out so much out of insecurity. And Jack's character says multiple times, I don't like how I am. And I don't want to be this way, but I don't know why I keep doing it. Because he misbehaves. He gets in trouble at school. He keeps roughhousing, breaking rules. He's a misogynist when he hangs out with his shitty friends and he feels like he's putting on this tough guy front.
So, what do we do?
What do you mean?
I mean, what shall we do? Because this isn't working. We barely have any money. Kathy's moving out now. And on top of it all, you've gone wild. You lie.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do. You're smoking cigarettes. You're stealing from Marion's purse. I can't handle it anymore, and it scares me. I don't know what to do. So you tell me.
I can be better. And I will be. I hate the way I am. I don't know why I do it.
And then you see in that moment, like, somebody realizing that they have a fork in the road and have a moment of self-determination. That was just like, to watch somebody choose the path of tenderness in a moment of self-determination felt so good, knowing that he had been shaped by so much violence up to that point.
Yeah. And you make a really good point. And I had noted this even going into this. There's a part in the film where Jack actually says, one night he kissed me, or I kissed him, or we kissed each other. It surprised us both. After that, whenever we felt particularly close, we turned on each other. And so it was this notion of like, I also think too, there's something about masculinity and this whole film. I think that's one of the reasons why as an adult, I have such an admiration for the film, because there's such a, how do I say this? I think we really have to, I mean, even in the 90s, it's interesting the fact that someone was talking about this, that there's so much violence in the softness of men, of being a man per se, right? And this idea that in this moment, they turned on each other when they felt like they were too close, because there's this wall or this bridge that you have to kind of keep away from someone who exemplifies the same ideology, the same identity, or the same pieces of you. And so I think for me, there's just so much to say around this idea of how Jack actualized his emotionalness or emotionality. I don't know if that's a word, but there's
I'm trying to decide if emotionality is a word. I know it's a word that's happening, like casted. It's happening, even though that's not in comfortability. But like, I don't have any comfortability with like implementing those into my vernacular.
Correct. Right. But there's still there's like I said, there's this strong emotional discomfort that they both have with each other. And I think, thank you, it is a word. Okay.
Producer Daniel weighing in says it is a word.
It is a word. Thank God. Okay. Because again, I am a college student. This idea of the emotionality of just being comfortable with someone, right? Regardless of gender. And I don't know if we as people afford that to cisgender men, right? Like two women can lay on each other on a couch and watch a movie and eat popcorn and have a good time and no one says anything. But two men doing it, right? It becomes a sexuality thing. And so I as I watch the film, and even again, watching it back and as an adult, really thinking about what this film is trying to say, there's just so much to be said about the ways that men push, and why it's so hard. And I think that's also a big part of, I think a lot about this notion of like what's happening in the world around, who does mass shootings, right? Yeah. When you do get a chance to talk to someone who's done a mass shooting, trigger warning for folks, most of the time they will tell you there was this deep rage or this deep sadness that they had. And I think a lot of that is particularly because they don't know how to have relationships with other men specifically in their lives. I don't think they have good relationships with anybody, TBH. I think a lot of cis white straight men struggle with that. And so, there's layers to that shit. But I say all of that to say that in particular scene says so much about relationships. I think even down to like, so if we were to kind of break down Robert De Niro's character, right? This notion of this man who is so angry all the time and is literally doing anything and everything that he can to not only make Jack's life a living hell, but his mother's life a living hell too.
No. Ryan, I'll hurt you if you don't do it now. Come on. Come on. Let's go, God damn it. Let's start, you little fucking sissy, all your goddamn fucking life. Quitter? Gonna be a goddamn quitter? Let's go. Come on, damn you. Don't go all shy and delicate on me now. You're acting as sissy as Little Miss Arthur Gale. You know that? And you know what I'm gonna call you? I'm gonna call you Little Miss Jackie Wolf. Oh my yes, oh Jackie, oh my yes, Little Miss Jackie Wolf, Little Miss Jackie Wolf. Is that what you want me to call you? Is that what you want the kids in the school to call you? Jackie Wolf? Come on, let's go. Come on, let's do it. Oh, Jesus Christ, if you're gonna act like a...
Just about got dry gulch, mister.
You know, when we really break that down, it says so much about the society, and it says so much about the ways that we uphold masculinity as being kind of like everybody needs to carry masculine energy. And it's like, but how detrimental is that? Like, how much harm is it causing to not only just the people you love or you're supposed to love, but also to the world? And I think that's the thing I've had the hardest time with hearing, you know, Mark and people like him. You know, I don't know if you've even been paying attention to like these men who go to like these men camps where I forget what they call them, but they're like these camps where they're like yelling at each other and they're like getting their aggression out. And it's like, girl, you just need a hug. Like, let someone hug you. Let someone, masculinity camps, coaches, like, why? Like, why are you? And I know what that why is. And I also talk about it in my book about how the world hates femininity. Like, the world hates women. So it's very clear in this film that, you know, that's kind of the overtone, right? Is that, you know, being womanly or being, you know, any type. And that's why it's called This Boy's Life in a sense of like, yeah, it is his life. And this are all the terrible things he's going through, but he's also dealing with all of the things that everyone in this world is putting onto him. He actually really has no idea who the hell he is throughout the you know, it doesn't even seem like till you get to the end where he's at that scene where the rain is on his face.
I'll tell you one thing, you'll remember me!
It was as easy as that.
You'll remember me!
We just picked up and left. You can dream of a moment for years and still somehow miss it when it comes. You've got to reach through the flames and take it, or lose it forever. I took it, so did my mother. We never looked back.
That he's like, I've gone through all of these terrible things and I've been able to figure out who I am. But for the most part of the movie, there's just all of these really terrible people and terrible things being put onto him. And so that's kind of how I feel about, you know, just where we are in this world. Like, we're having a lot of sad people tell us who we need to be and how we need to show up. And yeah, that's ultimately why I do a lot of what I do.
It is time for a break, but we will be back with more on This Boy's Life and the life of Dr. John Paul. Then I will have one quick thing before I go about the cinematic extravaganza that is Sinners. I've seen it and I just want to talk about it for a little bit at the end, you guys, so stick around.
Good evening. Thanks for tuning in to 101.1 Max Fun. It's midnight here on Host to Coast, and we've got Sarah from Michigan on line 1.
Hi, I'm calling in for some help. I used to love reading, but between grad school, having kids, and the general state of the world, I can't seem to pick up a book and stick with it anymore.
Sarah, this is an easy one. Just listen to Reading Glasses, a podcast designed to help you read better. Bria and Mallory will get all the pressure, shame, and guilt out of your reading life. You'll be finishing books you love in no time.
Great, that sounds amazing. Also, I do think my husband is cheating on me with Mothman. Can you help me with that one?
Ooh, I don't think they cover that. Reading Glasses, every Thursday on Maximum Fun.
WrestleMania is the biggest
and busiest
time of the year for wrestling.
And the Tights and Fights podcast is more important than ever.
We have so many questions to explore. How can you understand John Cena's motivation as a bad guy? Why is a car crash actually a great expression of friendship?
You mean friendship, right?
Of course.
Whether you're a longtime wrestling fan or coming back after a break, Tights and Fights has you covered.
This WrestleMania and every weekend after on Maximum Fun.
Tights and Fights podcast. Tights and Fights.
thinking of Arthur in this, and then thinking of like with like the thinking of looking at the subtitle of your book, revealing the power of visibly queer voices in media. A thing I wanted to ask you about was I was listening to you on Janet Varney's JV Club podcast.
Yeah.
And you were talking about in the church how there could be feelings of surveillance. And that, like, you knew well the feeling of being watched.
Yeah.
And as a Black fat femme individual, that is a very visible way to be. But it is being surveilled without necessarily being seen. It is being watched without being perceived.
Yeah.
And I wanted to hear about the tension. And like we have Arthur, who is so very himself in this movie, and he doesn't seem to mask himself for anyone. But if anybody but to be named as what his cues send out, like homo is an unkind way to have put that, especially in the 1950s.
Right.
But he lashes out violently and he demands to Jack, take it back.
Get up! Get up, you son of a bitch, Steve! Oh shit, get up! I'll kill you! Take it back. Take it back.
Okay.
Say it.
I take it back.
No. Say you're not a homo.
You're not a homo.
Come on, Pepper.
And when he says, fine, I take it back, he says, no, you say you're not a homo. Like, I need you to put those words back in your mouth, because the implications of them being true at like a local and at a micro and a macro level for Arthur are huge, if that is accurate. And even if he is good within himself, it can't be like his public line. And so I wanted to hear from you about that tension between the reclamation of visibility and the threat of visibility that I would assume you have had to navigate.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, I mean, actually mention this in one of my chapters. I say there's something so interesting about being so seen and so visible, both for like my Black identity and my queer identity and my fat identity. And then at the same time being extremely invisible at the same time.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
Right. And so like this notion of like the world doesn't see you, but they see you. Right.
Yeah.
And I think
they don't see you, but they're going to find you.
Right. And they'll find you, and, you know, and they're going to shame you for being who you are.
Right.
They'll find ways. And so like I even shared, you know, I don't think I shared this in the book, but I know that there was a moment where I remember coming down, I think was it last June or April? It was last April. I was out in Arizona for a speaking engagement, and I can clearly remember the man standing in front of the men's restroom staring at me and trying to like surveil me into what restroom I was going to go in. Sure. And him basically being, as soon as I get into the men's area, him looking at me going, excuse me. And I turn around and I said, mind your business, sir. Like, this has nothing to do with you. Like, I'm going to the bathroom. Mind your business. I have no idea who you are.
Yeah.
But all of that to be said, like, those are the different ways that society surveils you, right? They're wanting to know what bathroom you're going in. They want to know your gender. They want to know if you're queer. They want to know what, you know, all of these things, right? I've had kids run up to me and ask me, are you a boy or a girl? Like, that's a okay question to ask somebody. And I think about that in the sense of this idea of being so visible, but yet invisible.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is, you know, we're supposed to, I think the piece where I'm going to go with this is, I think there's supposed to be shame. And I think that's the thing, you know, and I talk about this when I get into like chapters 9 and 10 of my book. I talk about the word audacity. And I own the word audacity, because I think about oftentimes how people look at me or how people respond to me. And because of all of the stuff that I've had to go through or the things I've experienced, I think there's still an element of people being like, how dare John has the audacity to love who he is or who they are, right? How dare a trans woman, even with all of these things that are happening in the world, how dare she wake up in the morning,
right,
and put on her makeup and go out into the world and slay, right? Like, those are the things that I think about. And so this movie, really, if you really look at the, like, kind of what the overarching bubble is of this movie, right? There's multiple moments where shame kind of creeps into the space and is doing all that it can to try to make people feel terrible about who you are. You have Dwight trying to make Jack feel shame about who they are, what they're not doing.
And it seems largely because Dwight seems to feel, though he would never betray it, literally like an internalized sense of shame over what he's never going to be. And therefore he must keep others away from their possibility.
That part.
My application forms must have come today, and he threw them away.
Hey, I thought I was helping him. Thought I'd save him some trouble. Cause he's got no chance of getting into some fancy prep school.
You've always got your nose pressed up against the bake shop window, haven't you, Dwight?
What?
You're so afraid that someone else is going to get something that you never had. It's what makes you mean. And you know something, Dwight? One of these days, all of that meanness is going to snap back and slap you right in the face.
Oh, I'm so scared. I'm so scared. I'm so scared. Oh! This is all you gave me for dinner?
And also, you have Jack trying to shame, Arthur for liking and loving who they are, right? And this notion of if you say, and then also too, there's this element of shame around Arthur that if someone else vocalizes that I'm queer out loud, then that means I have to say it out loud, and then that means it's true. And I think that's the thing I've come to terms with in a lot of the work that I do around not only just myself, but in the work that I do in general, of this notion of living in truth. What does that truly mean? Like interrogating truth. And I think, again, a lot of it, I say in this world, the easiest way for people to feel terrible about who they are is to either keep them in fear or to keep them in shame, right? If I can shame you enough for being fat, if I can shame you enough for being queer, and it makes it easy for me to have control and have power over you. And I think once you move out of that, like, again, at this point, because I tell people this all the time, nothing you could say or do to me is going to make me stop doing what I do, right? I had someone email me yesterday and basically say, all of the work you're doing, ex gay is out. And, it's basically, in so many words, the email was, ex gay is going to be a thing that's coming for you and your work will be obsolete. And I was like, well, the data is actually showing the opposite, sis. I'm a researcher and I've done the research, and it's showing more and more that youth are actually identifying as queer.
Right.
So, so I'm like, so I don't know. So like, basically go have the day you deserve. Like you bothering me is not going to change the fact that people are accepting and learning to love who they are. And I think that this notion of, and especially, I feel like I'm on a soapbox right now, but especially with religion, I think religion has a lot of, that's how they control and manipulate people in religion. Right. It's to keep them in shame, to keep them in fear of this notion of, if I don't live up to the expectations of this random being that the world talks about, then I'll never be, I'll never be good. But okay, girl, go off, so.
Was it something I really held on to when I was listening to your conversation with Janet Varney, was like, you were like, if I want one thing, people to take away one, it's like, what is the true nature of autonomy and like autonomous, like self-determination? And watching this movie, like when it ended, what really like settled in for me, I was like, this is a movie about that, like about each character's self-determination. Like the self-determination of Dwight is that he feels like he has lost that ability, so he must take it away from others. And Ellen Barkin feels like she is limited in her self-determination because she is a woman in the 1950s and a single mother, and so she must adhere to like this trap of an abusive marriage until she decides not to and pushes back. And then Jack's entire arc is like figuring out even what self-determination means when he doesn't know who he is most of the time.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's, I think there's just so much to be said, I think, around how quick and how easy it is for us to fall into the trap of wanting to be something for everyone, right? Or wanting to be everything for everybody. And I tell people this, like, one of the things that has really helped me sleep better at night is recognizing that I'm not for everybody. I'm not for everybody, that I don't need to be for everybody.
Right.
And also recognizing too that the way I show up in the world, not everybody has to agree with it. Like the way you feel about me and the way I show up in this world has nothing to do with me. And it's everything to do with you and the work you need to do to become a better person. And so I think, I just really look at, and then, like I said, I think that closing scene is so powerful because, we oftentimes get handed such a shitty deck of cards. Can you cuss here? I don't know.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But yet we often get handed such a shitty deck of cards, and we oftentimes don't know what to do with them. And that's something, like I said, in my book, I really talk about, is this notion of, God handed me a whole entire deck of yellow Uno cards and was like, play. You don't get no reverses. You don't get no draw twos. You don't get no plus, 4+. You get nothing. You just get a whole deck of numbered Uno cards. Play. And and how hard it can be to sometimes feel like you're in this game and you don't know how to play the deck of cards you've been handed, but someone is telling you you got to make a move. And I think that that's what this film is really showing, especially with, with Jack's mom leaving. She recognized, I have nothing in this moment. I would rather have me and have nothing in this moment. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's just something that's so powerful that we can take away from films like this is really knowing that even in many of the moments when we feel like we don't have anything to give, there is still something for us to play with,
And I get I have to, I would just love to keep throwing things at you forever. But my final question would be, I guess more of like I would just love to hear your thoughts on, because a thing that comes up a lot on the show is like, one of my absolute favorite things about life is that I am a queer person. And that means everything I watch is through that filter. Yeah. And it just like, I can't imagine not having it. And it feels like putting a kaleidoscope filter on something plain. I remember I was at a bridal shower for a straight married couple, and they I was standing around with two women. We were talking about the movie Bombshell, and not a movie I care for, but I was very surprised when there is a scene where it's like Margot Robbie's character goes home, and the next time with Kate McKinnon's, and the next time you see her, she's like in her bed in her underwear. And we're talking about that movie. I was like, listen, I wasn't hot on that movie, but I love that they have Margot Robbie hooking up with Kate McKinnon. And those two women looked at me and they were like, when? I was like, the scene where they start in a bar flirting and then they go to Kate McKinnon's apartment and Kate's in boxer shorts and Margot Robbie's under the sheets wearing only a bra. And they were like, oh, I thought they were just hanging out.
And so they don't see,
and I was like, God, to live with these horse blinders. And I just wanted to hear from you. Like you mentioned, like you're a cultural critic. I wanted to hear from you about getting to live with that superpower of seeing the world through the intersection of lenses that you do bring to it, because that is just more ways and more perspectives of getting to bring to every little thing.
Yeah. Well, I would always, I don't know if I really mentioned this in any of my work or in my book, but I do mention that, I remember taking a gender, race, and media course when I was in college, and how affirming that class was, because even though it was being taught by a white instructor, he was really teaching us how to kind of like watch media or look at media. And this was like, at the time, social media was just starting to bud. We had, television and film, and we also had music. And so we were looking at all of it. And I think for me, I always kind of take it back to this notion of like how amazing it is when you do get to see yourself, or also when you recognize that a story is layered in so many different factions, right? And so like I take a movie like, for instance, I'm trying to think of a movie just offhand that I absolutely adore. Okay, maybe. So let's just go here. The Color Purple, right? Cool. For some, The Color Purple may just be a movie about a Black girl who's dealing with living in 1920. Okay, right? You could easily just take that away from that film. But when you really start digging into The Color Purple and what Alice Walker was really trying to say, there's so much more that's there. And I think that's the thing that makes me so happy. Like, even down to like just media in the last couple of weeks, when we look at Kendrick Lamar's performance, and when we look at Beyonce's Artist of the Year win, and we look at all these things, right? I think there's just something that's so inherently beautiful for me of being able to, like, even though Kendrick is not my cup of tea, it makes me so happy to see Black people happy, and to see Black people really interrogating systems that often we didn't have the space or the language to interrogate. And I think that's the thing that, like, kind of to your point about the, the Margot Robbie and the Kate McKinnon of it all, it really is this notion of like, you have this language as a queer person that has really made that really, it's kind of like this, like, you go, I don't want to say that, straight cis people have, bland soup. Sometimes they can't cook, but I think that it is one of those things. I don't think a lot of people can cook.
Frankly.
But I will say, I think there's just something to be said when you do go to someone's house and they tell you, oh, I went to cooking school and I lived in France for a few years, and then I went to Spain and I learned how to do this and I learned how to do that. And now this is the reason why I can cook so well. That's kind of what it is to be Black and queer for me personally, to be trans, to be non-binary. There's all these ingredients that I have that I can maneuver the world around with, and it doesn't make me locked into just this bland, Panera bread sandwich and soup that a lot of people in this world think is the right way to eat, So I think about it from that perspective. I love the idea, like as challenging as it is to see things from that perspective at moments, it also makes it extremely cool when I can see things and I can go, okay, I see all of the layers, exactly what that creator or what that person was trying to give to the world. So yeah.
That is the best. That's the best thing, and I can't do better than that to close it out. I think that is such a beautiful bow to put on this conversation, and thank you so much for coming on. And your book, Black Fat Femme: Revealing the Power of Visibly Queer Voices in Media and Learning to Love Yourself. That is the book that is on the way. And thank you so much for taking the time with us again today.
I so appreciate it. This was a blast.
Thank you so much to Dr. John Paul Higgins for such a thoughtful interview on a timeless film. This holds up, guys. This one's pretty good. Dr. John Paul's book, again, Black Fat Femme: Revealing the Power of Visibly Queer Voices in Media and Learning to Love Yourself, is available right now, and you must pick it up. And now, that one quick thing before I go. It's Sinners time, baby. It has arrived in LA. We're always sort of lucky enough to be surrounded by more film advertising than just like I feel like anywhere else you could be. So I have been just surrounded by walking past walls of Sinners posters for weeks on end now. Obviously been super excited about it. Almost positive I've talked about it on the show. As another one quick thing as a kind of preview. It's great, man. I'm so glad Ryan Coogler wanted to make this movie, that this was the one where he was like, no, this one's, I need to make something that is straight from me, that is purely my passion. Obviously he made the Black Panther movies, and he made Fruitvale Station, which a great movie, and the beginning of his collaborations with Michael B. Jordan, but also still someone else's story. And this one really came from a lot of personal places. He has talked about really being inspired by an uncle of his growing up listening to Delta blues music, and this movie is the heartbeat that runs through it is absolutely blues. The pulse of the entire thing is music itself. It is a blast. He's also talked about Ryan Coogler, how he wanted to entertain people. This was about entertaining people. It's something so personal and close to his heart, but he wanted people at the movies to have so much fun. I went and saw it in IMAX 70 because we have one of those very good theaters near me where I was able to go check it out in that absolute monster format. It's a great time at the movies. This see it on a big screen, see it loud. Michael B. Jordan in dual roles, just chewing up the screen. Haley Steinfeld in a role that so many of us Haley stans have been waiting to see her sink her teeth into for some time now. Jack O'Connell, very excited that more people are getting excited about what he can do, because he's a very talented actor. He's been putting it out there for a while, but he really gets to like dive in with this one. Miles Caton, wow, that voice. And you could mean his singing voice, but I just mean his speaking voice, honestly. There's so much to say about Sinners, so much to say about its box office, so much to say about how the reception to its box office in certain trade publications. I'm not going to get into all that. I'm just going to say, go see a really fun and cool movie. The parallels from Dusk Till Dawn from Dusk Till Dawn are not unfounded. I'm like not going to say a bunch more, because why would I do that? It's surprising and it's fun and it is electric. And don't worry if you're a scaredy cat kind of person. It's more of a like, it's not like a jump scary kind of movie. Like maybe there's one or two of those, but it's really not meant to be like a thrillers and chillers kind of designation. It's suspenseful, and I would call it more action horror personally. But yeah, God, Delroy Lindo, that man better have an Oscar. That man better have an Oscar by the time it's all said and done. Delroy Lindo. Just got great forever. But yeah, that's what it is. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna, again, people have been spoiling this movie enough on Twitter. I do not need to tell you any more specifics about it. Just go and see movies as they were meant to be seen on a big screen. And that is our show, and a parting sentiment we love to go out on. You can keep up with us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us wherever you do that, wherever you are listening, to get every new episode in your feed automatically. And review us, rate and review us. We love that too. Follow us and find out more about what's going on at our Instagram feed at Feeling Seen Pod. We are also on Blue Sky, me and the pod both. Search Feeling Seen for the show, or just me, Jorcru, Jorcru. Same handle on Twitter. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. This show is produced by Daniel Huesias and Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
Supported directly by you.